I woke up on Easter morning in 2025 about 4 a.m. and I realized that I was unhappy. I realized I was unfulfilled. I was turning 60 in a few months. I'd had some health scares. I had some personal problems and relationship issues and family things. And I just went, this can't be it, can it? God, I've walked with you and I've been a part of your world for how long, and I just don't feel good. And I got out of bed and I went to the kitchen table and I opened my computer and I started making notes and I started working through this. And slowly but surely, of course, it's become my book. But really, my process was, am I really who I am, or am I somebody else? I had become what everyone else needed me to be or wanted me to be.
That's the voice of Randy Bishop, who took that Easter experience to reshape his life and then to share the path with others. Bishop has written a book called The Method to help you figure out simple ways to make changes in your life. In this episode, I'll ask Bishop for his ideas on becoming rather than improving yourself, how God joins you on your transformation journey, and practical, simple steps for living your faith each day. His approach allows you to cut through the clutter of your life and find a straightforward path to becoming someone new. I'm Cecil Taylor of Cecil Taylor Ministries, teaching Christians how to live a 7-day practical faith. Everything I do, whether blogs, books, videos, or this podcast, is about taking our faith from Sunday into the rest of the week, applying scripture and faith to life situations. I'm also interested in children and parents, as I've written a book entitled Unison Parenting, the comprehensive guide to navigating Christian parenthood with one voice. Find more about the book in the podcast notes, as well as much more about my overall ministry and how it can help you. In the Practical Faith Academy podcast, I add other voices with other life experiences to understand how they put faith into practice. Please subscribe to my podcast according to your listening platform's instructions. I welcome your comments and your sharing of this podcast with others. Randy Bishop joins me now. He's an author, speaker, and a guide for people navigating midlife transitions. Identity, purpose, resilience, and meaning are some of his themes. Randy, it's good to have you here to talk about personal transformation on the Practical Faith Academy.
Thank you, Cecil. It's great to be here.
So when I say 7-day practical faith, what does that mean to you?
Well, to me, it means let's just go through every day exhibiting our faith, practicing our faith, and make it, real. Sometimes we try to make it too churchy or too religious. I think it just needs to be practical. I don't know if you know this, but I spent 16 years as a worship pastor. And so for me, it just really became a lifestyle of understanding God's presence every moment, every day.
It's funny, when we were talking before we came on the air, we talked about words that start with RE, because your book that we'll talk about in a little bit is called The Method. And so when you use words like real, now I'm like attuned to that, that there's an RE in there. So we'll have the listeners play bingo for all the RE words that come up during our podcast. Well, you have written a couple of books now. One of them, The Method. And what's the common thread with your books? What's the main focus of your work?
Really, everything I write is really about just common everyday observations that should allow us just to relate to each other and keep moving our lives forward. My first book was called Life Lessons That Life Hasn't Lessened. And it's a book where I realized that I'd said all these sayings throughout the years. I'm 60 years old, and I realized there are so many of these things. And it actually came because I was talking to a friend, and I said, well, let me tell you a life lesson that life hasn't lessened for me. And I went, wait a minute. I think I could write this book. And so I went back through Facebook and through all the things I'd written and went, oh, look at this little quip, and I pulled it out and then I wrote about it. And just those practical things that just say, wow, this has never lost its flavor over the years. And then with the Method, it just really kind of came out of my own personal journey where I went through a period of just rebirth, I guess, is what I'd almost call you, that midlife transition that you spoke about, where I basically wrote down my process and said, this is how I got through it. And I think it's simple enough and easy enough just to help people in their journeys.
I relate to that because the first book I wrote was on crisis and addressing crisis as a Christian. And the way it came about was me thinking about what am I really doing? I'm handling crisis better. So the same thing happened for you. Like, how am I handling transformation? And so we speak out of our knowledge, our life evidence.
Right.
So what is the biggest transformation from the man you were into the man you are now?
Wow, that is a great question. Um, I've always worn my heart on my sleeve. If you asked any of my friends, if you asked my family, I've always been an open book. I think the biggest issue and the biggest transformation for me really came down to saying, what book was I opening? In a lot of ways, I woke up on Easter morning in 2025 about 4 a.m. and I realized that I was unhappy. I realized I was unfulfilled. I was turning 60 in a few months. I'd had some health scares. I had some personal problems and relationship issues and family thing. And I just went, this can't be it, can it? God, I've walked with you and I've been a part of your world for how long, and I just don't feel good. And I got out of bed and I went to the kitchen table and I opened my computer and I started making notes and I started working through this. And slowly but surely, of course, it's become my book. But really, my process was, am I really who I am or am I somebody else? And what I really realized was there's an RE word for you, really. But what I realized was I had become what everyone else needed me to be or wanted me to be. I don't think I had uniquely become myself. I don't think I'd really found my voice and said what I wanted to say the way I wanted to say it. And sometimes that gets you in trouble. I mean, sometimes that'll cost you a friend or a family member because they'll disagree or they don't like your new direction because you're defining yourself. So it was quite the process to understand that I had invested in places that weren't investing in me and I was just depleted. And so I'm a new person, different person than I was almost a year ago. And it's still a process.
I really relate to that because I feel some of that myself. But that's very interesting to realize you may be one thing, maybe you're being someone for other people, but you're not being true to yourself and who you really are and not
Oh,
speaking your own
absolutely.
voice. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'm just going to say that one of the things that I have in my book, I end up at the end of every chapter, they're simple, but I ask questions, questions that you should reflect on. There's your RE word. But one of my favorite questions in here is, what belief do I keep acting on that might no longer serve me? And that was one of those questions that I really wrestled with because I started to tear apart little by little the past. I started to tear apart the little things I agreed to that I'm not even sure why I agreed to them. And if I didn't go back and look one step at a time, I might just keep operating and becoming somebody that everyone else wants me to be, but I don't necessarily think so. I need to start being honest about who I am. So that was part of the process.
In your new book called The Re Method, you just released it in December. You do use a three-part model for a change journey of reflect the truth, reframe the meaning, and restore the life. So, discuss what a change journey based on that model looks like.
Well, I tell everybody that, how when it comes down to it, sometimes we think that our journey, we think that our process is going to be this really big thing, and it is. It's a big thing, but we can't do it all at one time. So for me, the process is to reflect a little bit, reframe a little bit, restore a little bit, and then repeat a lot. Because if we try to do it all at one time, we're going to overwhelm our system. And so always say the way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And so I'd rather take a look at one belief and ask myself, does this still fit? Does this still hold? And then if not, what do I need to do? How do I empower myself with this one maybe reframed, a new perspective on it? And then how do I restore it into my life? And then how do I start lining up my life with this value that I've now defined differently? So that's the transformation, is to just keep this process rolling, one thing at a time.
Let me pause a moment to tell you about some of the options I provide for increasing your daily practice of faith. They fall into two categories: options for your own study and options for group study. You can find both at ceciltaylorministries.com by clicking on Instant Content Products. My books and study guides help you chart an individual path to deepening your faith. My small group video studies and related guides allow you and others to journey together, discussing and implementing new concepts I propose. Let me share one option for transforming your way of thinking. It's called Live Like You're Loved, a book and video study which asks the question, what if you truly believe in your soul that God loves you, forgives you, sends you into the world each day, and walks beside you eternally? What would your life look like then? If you've listened to this podcast and never really explored what I offer, please check out ceciltaylorministries.com to find ways to make your faith real each day. My guest is Randy Bishop on the Practical Faith Academy today. And Randy, one thing that strikes me, I remember reading a book one time where you were hashing over your past and it said, reshoot your movie. Another re word there, but
Yeah.
reshoot your movie because sometimes we can tell ourselves stories about what our past was and not look at it correctly. Or sometimes it helps to say, to put a more positive spin, to say, yes, that happened, but I realize now I could give myself grace for this reason or whatever, and I'm going to reshoot the movie in my head and think of it a little more successfully. What's your response to that? That's kind of a different way of looking at it, but what do you think about reshooting and reframing your movie?
It's exactly I think it's exactly the same process. Sure. My idea is just to take that limiting perspective, that limited story that, we always you ever watch a movie and wonder what it looked like from the left or from the right, not just right on. Okay. Sometimes we're looking right here. And if we just move, we'd see a different perspective. We might see something different. I'm a full-time student again, which is odd, but fun. I'm learning things and it's fun. But in psychology class, I think it was psychology, talking about how perspective is something that's learned. And the younger a person is, they have to develop understanding perspective. So if you put them on one side of a wall and they saw a ball, you'd say, "Hey, what do you have here?" And they'd say, "A ball." And then you'd move them to the other side of the wall and they'd say, "What do you have there?" And they'd say, "I have blocks." And then if you said, "Well, what do I have over here?" And you're on the other side of the wall, they'd say you have blocks because they can only see the blocks. They don't see what they did see. There's just something about perspective, that as we grow, we can learn to see it differently. We can learn to understand it differently. And I think that should totally go on with us as we grow up too. Again, I'm 60 and I'm still becoming Randy. I'm not done. I'm not broken. I'm not, don't need fixed. I just need to keep becoming who I am. And that perspective is everything.
How does God factor into this journey?
Well, for me, God factors into the journey because I live and breathe because of him. I mean, I have to understand that daily, I wouldn't be here without him. Um, I'm not a sit down and study for an hour or two kind of a guy. I never have been, but I am a moment by moment understand God's presence kind of a guy. Again, as a worship pastor, that's what I actually tried to encourage everyone is just understand God's presence is never gone. It's not about Sunday morning for an hour. It's about every moment, every day he's with you.
I know you do some coaching, and I'm curious, do you find that people who come to you for coaching have similar issues to you of how they've had the maybe a different perspective and now they have a new perspective, or do you see other models? What do you see from people that makes you want to reach out with books like yours?
I think people have one thing in common, and that is they don't think they have anything in common with anyone.
Huh? How about that?
Have you ever talked to someone who says no one understands?
Yes.
And you're sitting there going, I totally get what you're talking about. When we're talking about it with someone, we feel the weight that only we can feel. Certainly, no one on the planet can feel this. But how many people are there now? 8 billion people? What are the odds that no one else has ever felt the way you do? I mean, it's pretty minute, I would think, that to think that you're by yourself alone experiencing this. So I think that everyone has a common thread that someone somewhere can understand.
And of course, biblically speaking, I mean, we know that we are afflicted so that we can comfort. I know that there have been people that said, "You're not going to understand this," but then I did
Yeah.
because I went through it myself, and not that my experience was 100% aligned with yours, but at the same time, very similar, and there were things I could use out of it to be more empathetic or to give suggestions if it was warranted, but more than anything to just understand. And I would think that's very comforting to the people you coach to hear that there are people who will understand you.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. I was talking on another podcast the other day, and I just said, how many times do we act like we're alone in the world? And it's only because we don't talk. It's only because we don't share it. And if we just get out of our comfort zone just a little and talk to one person. I have another friend that basically I think about who they talk to, and they talk to me. And I'm like surprised. You don't have anyone else that you talk to? I mean, please tell me that there's someone else, you know? And I just realized that that starts to be the human condition, especially in our day and age. The electronics give all the information. We really don't have to talk to anybody. So I think that we're a lot more alone today than we used to be, isolated. And I think that's what's really sad right now is we're probably going to get younger and younger at that. One of the things I learned in my communications class was that 20-year-olds are the most um, the age range of 20 and up is the largest age range saying that they're lonely.
Yeah.
I don't understand that. And I think it's because they all are wrapping their brains around this every day and not communicating with each other.
Randy, you talk about becoming instead of self-improvement. I'm really intrigued by that because I'm always trying to improve myself. What's the danger of always trying to fix ourselves?
Well, trying to fix yourself assumes that you're broken. I come from the background. My attitude is you're not broken. You're who you are. You might have some things that are broken ideas or broken memories or whatever, but you are the way God made you. You're not broken. You're becoming. I think our faith and I think our lives really should reflect a constant movement, and therefore you're not fixing something. You're just becoming something. If you go from a broken idea, you're almost defeated right away. And I don't want to feel defeated. And there are days I wake up feeling that, and I have to go, wait a minute. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. How can I be defeated? How can I be broken? I mean, there might be broken things, but me? Now, I think I'm just becoming. What is the one verse that says, being transformed from glory to glory? There's this idea that you're constantly in motion. Some people just stop moving. Some people stop growing. Some people stop becoming. And then I think they're broken, but I don't think they're broken. I think they're still just becoming. That's my attitude for it.
Well, and that's a great attitude. What do you see happening to people when they go through that mind transformation of saying, I'm not broken, I'm just becoming? Do they kind of open up? What happens with them?
Society around us wants us to feel that way because they want to sell self-help books. And I hate to say it that way. I have a book I want to sell. I really want to sell the book. But I'm not trying to help people self-help and buy my next method. The idea here is, this is 100 pages, pretty big type, small ideas. And it's because I want people to be helped. I don't want them to just pay me. I mean, yes, I'd like to make a living, but I want them to get something that they can keep moving with. But if society tells you you're busted, if society tells you you're broken, if society tells you something needs fixed, then you're always in defeat. And when you convince somebody, if they start to see themselves as a whole person becoming more whole, all of a sudden their perspective changes. Mine did. I woke up that morning going, is this it? I can't go another day. I can't do this. And I had to come up with, wait a minute, what do I really truly believe? Do I really truly believe that I've broken my life, that I need fixed? Is that what I really believe? I've stood on the platform of countless churches and said, being transformed from glory to glory. I've said things that I should be living. Well, why am I not doing that? Do I really not believe it? I think I believe it. So let's start figuring out how to say that. Let's start figuring out how to be that. And that was that transformation for me, that movement.
I'll return in a moment to conversing with Randy. Right now, I want to converse with you, the listener, and tell you about a blog post I recently shared. While I add to my 7-day practical faith blog each Friday, I write for my freewheeling blog once a month. In February, I reflected on Valentine's Day by telling the story of being rejected as a seventh grade Romeo, only to have my classmate reach out to me decades later to heal her rejection of me. It's a sweet story called Thank You for the Candy, and hundreds of people have read it so far. You can check out my blog entries on Facebook, search for Cecil Taylor Ministries, and follow me, won't you? If you're not on Facebook, you can also find my blogs by visiting ceciltaylorministries.com and clicking on blog. Well, we're having a very thoughtful conversation here. I'm Cecil Taylor along with Randy Bishop on the Practical Faith Academy. And Randy, if a listener feels disconnected from their sense of purpose right now, what's a gentle first question they can sit with this week?
I would tell them that if you're feeling disconnected from your purpose, the first question would be not who am I, because you're going to get digging deep. Don't do that one. Just ask yourself, what do I believe right now? What do I believe? And then if it's really negative, ask yourself how you can change that. Ask yourself if it's something about yourself, is this really what I think about myself? And look at yourself and just go, what about this? What about, and give yourself a different perspective. That's the reflect and the reframe part. Reflect a little bit about something you believe. One thing. It doesn't have to be 100. It just has to be one thing. What do I believe about me? Now, does that serve me? It doesn't, does it? Okay, how can I reframe that belief so that maybe I'm not limited in it, but it empowers me to move forward as a better person, as a more whole person? I might not have my purpose figured out, but at least I have another piece of my puzzle, and I'm just going to keep putting it together and keep becoming who I am.
Yeah, I like this idea of not trying to boil the ocean altogether, right?
I
Taking it
like that. I
one
like
bit
that a
at a
lot.
time, right? We can really get twisted if we try to do too much. I want to ask you a few questions about your faith life, and what do you find is the hardest part about putting faith into practice?
I'm putting it into practice. I mean,
Okay.
I think everybody across the board would agree with that. Probably the hardest part is actually putting it into practice. No, honestly, I have to say that the hardest part is trying to get over what everyone else says putting my faith into practice looks like. Because we have a ton of expectations. And depending on your religious background, right? I mean, there's a ton of variants. At one point, I think there were 600 variants of the Baptist Church, and it's like that's a head scratcher, you know. But what does that particular section of religion or faith or what whoever what do they say and what do they expect of me? But how about what does God expect? There are some simple ideas in the Bible, you know, but to do justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with God, you know, it doesn't take a whole lot to figure out what that might look like, rather than all of the you do this and you don't do this and you do this and you don't do this. How about we just boil it down to something that's bite size that I can exercise every day? This is my faith. And if I love justly and I do mercy and I walk humbly with God, what's that look like today? Rather than some big expansive idea. I once had a conversation with someone, and we were both talking about how the pastor we were sitting under would sit on the stage. He did. He sat on a bar stool, and he would preach. He was a wonderful man, but he would talk about how he prays 2 hours every day, and we felt guilty. I don't pray 2 hours a day. Am I not good enough? Is that what my Christian life is supposed to be about? Is that what my faith life is supposed to be? That I feel guilty now? Is that what I'm supposed to feel? Now, God bless him. He was saying what he said as an encouragement to everyone. But what it did to us is like shackle us, you know, put on some weight that made it heavy rather than, you know what, I can walk humbly with God today. Every morning I send a prayer to a friend of mine, verbal, record it and send it. And every morning I start with God, we woke up today and we get to experience this day and whatever you put in it. So thank you that we get to live in today. And I think that's walking humbly with God. Now, you know what? I just put my faith into practice.
Just waking up and having that thought. Randy, I find that putting myself in a position of let's talk about practical faith. People want to know stepping stones, right? They
Mhm.
want to know what is the exact path that you need to step on all the way. And I kind of feel like that's something the Pharisees used to do is say, you got to step on these stones. And if you get off the stones, you're doomed, that kind of thing. But it's at the same time, we can have ideas about, tips for how to put faith into practice. What's your best tip for putting faith into practice on a daily basis?
Practicing the presence of God. Who wrote that book? That was a great book. I can't remember the author. Practicing the presence of God. Just understanding, you know what? I remember writing a song. I'm a songwriter too. But years ago, I wrote a song, and it was because I saw a beggar who was honestly at the side of a road in front of a mall, and it said, "We'll work for food." And we drove right past him. And we got about half a block away. And I looked at my brother who was driving, and I said, "I need you to turn around." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "I'm going to go back and talk to that guy." And I never did anything like that. But it was just a ton of bricks. And I went, "Nope, I can't not look at this today. I can't not do it." And so I went back and talked to him, gave him a couple of dollars for, sandwich or something. But I mean, how many times do we not see the obvious way to practice our faith? I don't think we have to stand on a street corner and pray out loud like a Pharisee. I don't think we have to beat people on the top of their head with a big old Bible. In fact, I think that's probably counterproductive. I think being real. Let me tell you a practical thing I did with my children. And Cecil, I got a lot of stories, but I was a stay-home dad for several years. But my 5-year-old, my daughter, she would help me unload the groceries onto the conveyor belt. And as we stepped forward, I'd look at the name tag and I'd say, "Hey, Mary, how are you doing?" And Mary, "Yeah, I'm fine." I say, "That's great. Have you been working long today?" And we're putting our stuff up. And my 5-year-old daughter would look and go, "Dad, shh." And I'd say, "Why?" "We don't talk to her." And I said, "Why?" "Well, and I said, "She's a person and she's working and she's helping us. Don't you think we should be kind to her?" And she couldn't feel that, right? One day, I don't know how long later, we step up and my daughter starts putting things on the conveyor and she looks over and she can't read her name, but she just says, "Hi, how are you today? How you having a good day?" Now, I'm telling you something practical right there. You know, just being kind to another human being and not knowing anything about what they're going through. You could be a balm to their soul. You could be Jesus in flesh. You could be an
Amen.
angel of light right there and then, beaming into their life in a way that you have no idea. And my child got it in that moment because that lady beamed and went, "I'm fine. How are you?" And it was just neat to see this practical thing. Again, I don't want to beat somebody on top of the head with Bible. I don't. I just want to be true to who God made me to be, and kind. What's the fruit of the spirit? We got so many things we could draw on here. But that gets too religious sounding. Let's just be great people, helping people be great.
I love the way that sounds. That's amazing. So, Randy, let's wrap. I want you to tell our listeners how they can follow you and find your books and access your coaching and just tap into all this wisdom that you have becoming within you.
Oh, thank you very much. My books are available on Amazon.com, so you can find it at Amazon.com. And I don't know if you can see this, probably not very well, but I use my middle initial, so it's Randy E. Bishop. That's my author name. You can find me there. You'll find two books there: the Re Method, a framework for becoming, and you'll find the life lessons that life hasn't lessened. As far as getting a hold of me and learning about my coaching, right now I'm growing that. I'm putting my website together, but anybody can get a hold of me at Randy at lifelessonscoaching.net. That's Randy at lifelessonscoaching.net. And I'd love to talk to or help anyone that needs my help. And I think even in the back of the book, there may be a email or something back there for them. So love to see and talk to anybody, find some feedback. That'd be great.
Well, Randy, thank you for nourishing me today. And I know if I got nourished, a lot of other people did too. So thanks so much for being with me on the Practical Faith Academy.
You're very welcome. Thanks, Cecil, for having me.
Randy tells me he'll come back at any time on a moment's notice. I may take him up on that. I feel like we can just talk about anything and provide meaning and enjoyment to listeners. The next Practical Faith Academy episode returns to a topic from earlier in February, but from a different angle. My prior February conversation was with Ashley Kincaid, who had been estranged from her parents for 22 years. In connecting with her parents and rebuilding their relationships, Kincaid developed a method for either children or parents to reach out and try to start again. Well, Merritt Welker listened to that podcast and contacted me. She wanted to talk about the parent side of that equation and how to go on with your life after you've been rejected by your child. I said yes. It will be fascinating to engage on the important subject of estrangement again, especially to learn what happens when there seems to be no fairy tale ending for your family. That episode will drop in the first half of March. I talked earlier about my instant content products, and I'd really appreciate you investigating those paid options. I also offer free ways to benefit from my ministry. Subscribe to this podcast. Follow Cecil Taylor Ministries on Facebook, Instagram, or Pinterest, but be sure to sign up for my free monthly newsletters, Ministry Connection and Backstage Pass. They combine practical faith tips with updates on the ministry and on my life as well. And in March, I'll start a series in Backstage Pass showing you the behind-the-scenes journey as I write 2 books in 2026. Read about all these opportunities in the show notes and how you can stay in touch with my ministry. Until next time, remember, God sends you into the world every day.